While the isolationists and the interventionists in the American Republican Party and public debate the pros and cons of open and direct involvement in the attack on Iran and where it could lead, the son of the former Shah of Iran, who was ousted by the revolution and the Ayatollah Khomeini in 1979, the son says he's ready to take back control of the country. Exiled Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, told America's ABC News that he's got a plan to lead the transition to a new government.
What we have right now in Iran, a theocratic dictatorship, is not what the Iranian people want. It's not what has benefited them. On the contrary, it has bring our country to the brink of poverty, to the brink of desperation, to the brink of destruction. Our country is being literally destroyed by this regime. So we are all ready to step in to change the course for the better. I think Iran has the potential to be the next South Korea of the Middle East, as opposed to having become the North Korea of the Middle East. It's not because the people are incompetent or the nation doesn't have resources. It's just a corrupt, mafia-like regime that is plundering our resources, murdering our citizens, and setting havoc in the region.
That's the exiled Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, the son of the Shah of Iran, who was overthrown by the mullahs in 1979, speaking on America's ABC News this week. Now, it's important to touch on a little history here because while he'd no doubt be a better leader than the Ayatollahs for Iran and the world, his father's track record wasn't spotless. In 1941, during World War II, the British and Soviets forced the abdication of Iran's then Shah, accusing him of Nazi sympathies. And in his place, they installed his 21-year-old son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, as the new Shah of Iran. At first, his powers were limited. But in 1953, everything changed. And with the help of the CIA and Britain's MI6, the Shah orchestrated the overthrow of Iran's democratically elected Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, because he had nationalized Iran's oil.
The first real threat to the Shah's power came in the early 1950s. A new Prime Minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, had won huge public support by taking Iranian oil back into government ownership and ending the 40-year monopoly enjoyed by the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company. Mossadegh then set his sights on the Shah. He wanted to curb his power and turn him into a constitutional monarch, a titular head of state.
Now, MI6 and the CIA then moved in, and the overthrow of the Prime Minister gave the Shah near absolute power. He certainly was no longer just a titular head of a monarchy. He was in charge of the whole country. And it gave the US a very loyal ally in the region. Over the next 2 decades, the Shah modernized Iran rapidly. But political opposition was crushed. The secret police tortured and jailed dissenters. Wealth from oil booms flowed to a small group of elites, while many Iranians struggled in poverty. Secularism was imposed, and that angered the religious leaders. One voice rose louder than the rest: Ayatollah Khomeini, a radical cleric exiled for his criticism of the regime, and who by the late 1970s we'd led to a point where anger had really boiled into revolution. In January 1979, the Shah fled Iran. Weeks later, Ayatollah Khomeini returned in triumph, the monarchy collapsed, an Islamic Republic rose in its place, and that is what we've had ever since. Joining me now to discuss all of this is political analyst Professor Joseph Siracusa, the former inaugural Dean of Global Futures at Curtin University. Joe, history's never black and white. Lots of greys, lots of confusing things. There's never just good guys versus bad guys straight up, is it? And this history of Iran is complicated.
Yeah, you're quite right, Damian. Look, I give all these speeches about history's not linear. Nothing's in a straight line in the history business. It goes back and forth. And look, the Shah did modernize Persia, Iran, but his people were torturing people. They were stealing money. But they had the Americans on side. I remember Jimmy Carter's last trip to Iran. He was in the palace having a dinner with the Iran's entourage, and Carter gave a toast to the Shah, suggesting that or observing that Iran was an island of stability in a sea of turmoil. Well, that didn't work out so well. I mean, so much of Jimmy Carter's intelligence,
Oh
but
dear.
intelligence community. But look, Shah had everybody fooled because they thought he'd last forever. The trouble is, sooner or later, when you alienate the people, they're going to come for you. I don't care what government you are.
Right.
As soon as you crush people, they will turn on you.
Yeah. Okay. So what should we be reading into these comments from the Crown Prince Pahlavi? I mean, this sounds like it's a fait accompli, that he's ready to return. I mean, is there a plan going on here that we don't know about?
Nah, this is somewhere between Monty Python and Sellers. This is sort of the comedy relief on the end of the stage. This is the clown act. They're not coming back. The Persian people are not going to. Those young people, and half the country are on cell phones, and they're young folks. They're not going to put up with the monarchy and all that nonsense. Monarchy is kind of going out the door in most places. They're not going to reintroduce it. I mean, no one's going to replace a theocracy with a monarchy unless, of course, you're daft, and they're not going to do that.
So what do you think they will replace it? If there is regime change, what will have to
Well,
happen?
there'll be an interim government. There'll be some kind of elections. It'll still be, a heavy-handed country. But I think, maybe there is an opportunity here for democracy, or what we know as democracy, to emerge. That is self-determination. And so, this is something we have to understand, Damon, and I understand it as a historian. Sometimes we have to let people do what they want to do. We can't make them follow parliamentary democracy or American democracy. American democracy doesn't travel. So some Irish scholar once told me American democracy is like Guinness beer. It just doesn't travel very well. So this idea of fastening an American or parliamentary style on Iran it's not going to work.
Yeah. All right. Let's have a listen to another clip of Pahlavi, because he's talking about democracy. He's talking about, let's just play that next one from ABC News interview. Thanks, John.
So if the Ayatollah is overthrown, what happens? Who would take power there, and what do you think your role would be?
Well, I've stepped in the scene to lead this transition, to be able to see the process not only now until this regime finally collapses, but particularly what after next. So there's no void and there's no vacuum created. We are talking to people within Iran who are beginning to reach out to us to coordinate this effort. So basically, you're talking about an interim government that maintains orders in the country and makes sure the country continues functioning, but at the same time sets the stage for a democratic process whereby Iranians will ultimately be able to choose through the ballot box what ultimately is what they want for their own future.
He speaks with such authority about this that it makes me wonder if there's not a little, MI6 or CIA tactic going on there of like, well, have him in the background. He can be the one that steps in if we go to regime change.
I'm sure he's in touch with CIA and MI6 and all the rest of it. I mean, I'm sure he has his supporters there, people who have maybe no sense of what's going on. But, the idea of him returning to a country where his father was expelled, or there was a real revolution.
Yeah, it wasn't a fake revolution. It was a real revolution.
And there was a real revolution. He fell, and when Ayatollah took advantage of the opening. In other words, they didn't throw this guy out of power to bring the Ayatollah back. The Ayatollah came back and he took power. So he filled this vacuum. But there was a real revolution there, and the Persian people decided they'd had a gutful of monarchy.
Joe, how do you think all this is going to end? We should wrap up, I guess. But do we now have Donald Trump saying he's going to take a couple of weeks? That's a good sign that there might be time for a change of heart from the Iranian leadership, that they might open themselves up a little bit more to transparency, inspections. We do have Israel pushing for, this to be sort of, the final showdown. What's your take on the vibe across the Middle East? I mean, does Iran, we know when looking at the Middle East, we should always look at Iran and then look at Saudi Arabia. They're the two big powers battling for authority in the area, the Shia and the Sunni division there as well, I guess. But who's got the power right now? How's it all? Who's backing Israel?
Well, Israel has the backing of most of Europe and the United States, and the other thing too is that Israel's enemies, such as Iran, they're friends. Russia, Putin is off to the side. He's resetting the button with Washington. He doesn't want to get involved. The Syrian leader is very quiet about what's going on. These people who would have helped Iran publicly in the past are off to the sidelines.
The Saudis would have to be sort of in favour of any action against Iran, wouldn't they? I mean, if it was going to proceed, they would have. What I mean is they would have to get the nod. They would have to give their nod, in a sense.
Yeah, they're
US
watching
and
this
Israel.
very closely, and they're working very close with the Americans. But look, Damian, let's make some predictions until the next time
Go ahead.
you have me on. Number one, I think Donald Trump's going to cut a deal with the Iranians between now and 2 weeks from now. Okay,
I'd agree with that.
He's going to give them the off ramp, and incidentally, they're going to give him the off ramp. He's now, they say about Donald Trump, he doesn't like the fires, but he likes the fire engine and all the noises and the lights. I think he's going to get off this. America's not going to go to war with Iran because there are too many loose ends over there. Or too many sleeper cells ready to blow something up. So I think Donald Trump will continue to bankroll the Israelis. And let's face it, the Israelis are doing a pretty good job without Donald Trump. If you consider America's already at war with Iran as far as Iran's concerned. They think it's
of course, yeah. But just that Israel doesn't have that bunker bomb and they can't use it. They don't have the skill to use it either, right? You'd have to have an American plane coming in. You'd have to have an American dropping that bomb. To get into that
and I'm telling you, I don't think that I know that bomb won't work because it won't work without on-site inspections. And who's going to send the troops? It's not going to be the United States. It's going to be anybody, as a matter of fact. Anyway, I think Donald Trump would like to back away from the abyss. I think the Iranians would like to live another day. At least the leadership would. And I think the Israelis will get what they wanted at the end because, they have humiliated and defeated everybody in their neighborhood. Hamas, Hezbollah, and now the Iranians. I mean, the pressure off on Israel, I think, is off right now because they've been able to handle these people with American support, that is, physical support. But look, without ammunition bombs and interceptors, Israel would collapse. It's not collapsing. So in many ways, they're doing America's work, as the German chancellor said the other day. Israel is doing the dirty work for all of us. I think that's a very honest statement.
Yeah.
Yeah, this might be the last hurrah for the neocons or the so-called blob or the establishment, which is both Democratic and Republican.
Yeah.
They like to be involved. They like to be the wizards in charge of everything. But look, getting involved in a war with Iran with its 92 million people, all of whom would fight for the country, by the way. As soon as the invader comes in, people forget their differences and start shooting the invader. I mean, it's just common sense. Happens all the time. And I think the American people do not want to get involved in this. And look, Donald Trump understands as a impresario of television that if you're going to have an audience, you got to make sure it's a happy ending. He's not going to end his presidency with some bloody war, explaining American deaths to the American public day after day about why thousands of people have been killed either on ships or whatever it is. He doesn't want that kind of presidency. He wants to be remembered as a peacemaker, and he might pull it off. I mean, I think he'll get the Iranians to come to the party in a superficial way. Are the Iranians dangerous? Not really, but the leadership there is. I mean, they would do Israel terrible things if they could do it. But you notice they haven't been able to do it. Israelis have done the one thing that most nations don't want to do, including Australia, I might add, is they're involved in eternal vigilance. They're armed to the teeth and they're protecting themselves, and they're not waiting for anyone to come to the party. And so, that's what America loves, is nations that fight for themselves. They'll help anybody that helps themselves, but they're not going to help anybody who doesn't help themselves. So that's why America, sort of cozies up to Israel, because they're doing the dirty work.
Professor Joe Siracusa, always educational and informative. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us once again on The Other Side. I want to tell you about a fantastic initiative that's happening out of Canberra right now. It's called the Awards for Men in Leadership. The awards are given out on International Men's Day, which is November 19. They're designed to combat the increasing denigration of masculinity in our culture and the widespread discrimination against males inside and outside the workplace. The goal is to lift the well-being of boys and men and facilitate healthy collaboration between men and women. The awards for men in leadership are designed to inspire men to make a bigger contribution to family and community and to elevate positive male role models. There's a $10,000 scholarship for studies and professional development, public recognition for the winners, and a year of mentorship and executive coaching for each recipient. It's targeted at young men and middle-aged guys who fought their way up from some other kind of disadvantage. This is the third year of the awards, and it'll be the biggest yet. To find out more, just search up the Awards for Men in Leadership on Facebook. That was a segment clip from our weekly Friday night news show, The Other Side, which you can watch in full by simply going to YouTube and searching up The Other Side Australia. Then you'll find our full shows playlist. You can also find all of our full shows and our segments on our own website, othersidetv.com.au. That's othersidetv.com.au. Help us build a whole new Aussie media by joining us over there and signing up for the exclusive side.